What else? Oh, our allies are so impressed with the job that we're doing. He is making mistakes and or lying every step of the way. Yet there are quarters in the media saying that, no, it's you pesky conservative media types who are overplaying this.
Way over the top and unconnected to a perspective on the issue from the beginning.
I agree. It's been over the top. I think that we also see why it was so hard for presidents in the past to pull out of Afghanistan. They were afraid of exactly this kind of press overreaction.
The news media's complete inability to process what's actually happening in that. The news media's feigned naivete about, oh, you know, we've got him in this huge contradiction with himself.
Well, look, we like to win wars, okay? Fair enough, fair enough. Vanity Fair says that the right trying to weaponize, we're weaponizing the issue to get ahead in 2022. Inside that story, let's read it, please. Some of the political attacks from the GOP have been dishonest, unfairly laying blame for the chaotic conclusion to the 20-year war on Biden, while ignoring the role his predecessors, including Republicans Trump and George W. Bush, played in getting us there. Well, we talked about that certainly in the A block, especially George W. Bush, but you can't put this on Donald Trump. This is Joe Biden's show, and we're seeing very vividly that he's not up to handling it. As I mentioned, the fundamental mistakes that he is making every step of the way. It doesn't surprise me. The man has been caught lying in public so many times throughout his career. When he first made it big on the national stage, 1987, when he was running for president, he lied incessantly and had to drop out of the campaign because of lying. And when he started his most recent campaign for president, this time around, in 2019, his very announcement was all based on a lie.
Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. That's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime.
Whoa, it gives you chills, doesn't it? Well, he was lying. He was lying about, by the way, he touched on barely any issues. Take a look at what he touched on in this campaign announcement, which was based on a lie. Equality, Charlottesville, white supremacy, racism, and Trump. That's all I talked about. Now, about good people on both sides, you know the truth about that, right? If you don't, here it is.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
Totally true. You can be a very fine person and be for the preservation of Civil War statues in the South. You can also be a very fine person and think that they're somehow offensive and then should be dismantled. But he expressly said that neo-Nazis and the white supremacists should be condemned. Joe Biden's entire campaign is based on a lie. Therefore, his entire presidency is based on a lie. After all, he was elected, though, right? Take a look at this, and I thought this is remarkable. So Joe Biden spoke about those four issues. This is what Donald Trump spoke about when he launched his campaign for the presidency. Substantive issue after substantive issue. And you can go through it. You may not like how he said, what he said, but this was a campaign of substance based on the issues, and Joe Biden can't make the same claim. All right, now this. Overseas, he always loved talking about foreign countries and foreign affairs, far more than I think he liked talking about us, America, and our parochial interests. He hasn't said anything about Afghanistan. Isn't that amazing? He was president for 8 years of this 20-year war, and it's coming to a horrible end under his chosen successor. I went to his Twitter page today, and not a word. He's talking about everything else, the Olympics, the Paralympics, the Haiti earthquake, Obamacare sign-up, gerrymandering, climate change, and a happy birthday to his mother-in-law, Mrs. Robinson. He really should be weighing in. A lot of this is on him, and actually, I do believe he's actually in charge. This wasn't exaggeration. This was him bragging.
If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. I'd be fine with that.
Especially on a day like today, where everything is going bad overseas. Put Joe Biden out there to stutter and mumble and try to lie his way out of this situation. You know what some of my friends in the military are telling me? They view this as worse, more significant even, than December 7th, 1941. Now this we anticipated, 20 years in the making. 1941, that was a sneak attack. The strategic ramifications, though, of our failure in Afghanistan could be even more significant than what happened back in World War II. And back then, we were poised to fight. What are we poised to do now? Lick our wounds? Go home as losers? This is bad, bad stuff. I do remember how it started, though. September 11th, right on this island. The war in Afghanistan started in New York. Now, we got a late start, actually, with the counterattack. We did. It was about a month later before we struck the Taliban inside Afghanistan. When we did, though, it was a pure and righteous fight.
Yesterday, U.S. forces struck in more than a dozen target areas that included terrorist camps and forces, Taliban military facilities, including missile, vehicle, and armor maintenance. The second clip shows an armored vehicle in the open in the Kandahar barracks in southern Afghanistan, one of the training facilities and garrisons for the Taliban forces. And the final clip shows a Taliban security post in southern Afghanistan.
We were targeting the Taliban, and now the Taliban targeting us and chasing us out. This feels very much like a loss. Now, I blame a lot of folks, Joe Biden, far left, not the troops, those who enlisted, those who became commissioned officers, junior officers, mid-level officers, soldiers, Marines, not them, but their leaders, the generals. Classes, years of generals making fundamental mistakes and not being honest with us, not being direct with us, not being candid about what was actually happening there on the ground. For so many times, they went to Congress, they went on the news, and they were spinning us. You can tell they weren't leveling with us. And it started so early about Afghanistan, also Iraq, by the way, but especially Afghanistan. This is in 2003, 18 years ago, General Myers.
I'm equally positive about our progress in Afghanistan. Remnants of the Taliban have made desperate attempts to regain control over sections of the country, but continued pressure from the coalition operations is thwarting their efforts.
Spin, 13 years ago, General McKiernan.
I think that the development of the Afghan army is on a very good path right now. It's more than just developing infantry. It's developing a full range of enabling capabilities to go with their army.
It's bureaucratic speak. They're not being direct. And sometimes they just flat out BS'd us. General Caldwell, 10 years ago.
We've made tremendous strides, incredible progress in the last 20 months as I've watched this mission to unfold from when we first stood up the NATO Training Command. We've, as you well know, we fielded over 100,000 new police and army soldiers. They're probably the best trained, the best equipped, and the best led of any forces we've developed yet inside of Afghanistan.
They were selling the same record year after year after year. General Allen, 2011.
So I would say that beyond the clear tactical gains that have been made, the security gains that have been made, which in many respects have provided opportunities for growth of governance and economic opportunity, the solid partnership has been the thing that has been really striking for me all around the country.
That's not military talk. That's swamp talk. That's job protection talk. That's impress Congress talk. That's fool the public talk. Next, General Dunford, 2014.
It's fair to ask if we're winning in Afghanistan. I believe the answer is yes, and several facts allow me to say that with confidence. We have built Afghan security forces that, with increasingly reduced levels of support, are capable of providing security and denying terrorists safe haven.
Can you tell? Can you tell? You see the trend? Hey, we've had 4 years at least of straight talk from President Trump. We know when we're being spun. Next, General Campbell, 6 years ago.
But I think we continue every day to build upon their capacity, and we've seen some great progress in some of the operations based, even at the tactical level, on the intelligence structure, and not only in the hardware side, but also in the human capital side for intelligence.
Hardware, human capital. I mean, great. I know you've got your jargon, but why can't you be straight with us, huh? This is Mike Bloomberg's friend, Admiral Mike Mullen, in 2008.
One final note on Afghanistan. What I didn't expect, and that is the extent of the progress truly being made. I visited with the soldiers in a remote outpost of the Korengal Valley, not far from where this recent attack occurred. They showed me the positive changes they have helped bring about, the villages they can now enter, the Afghan police and forces they are training and trying to improve. It's not perfect. Clearly, we have a long way to go, but we are making strides.
13 years later, where are we? That is a sailor, Mike Mullen, and he was on the Sunday shows. Same guy. He's out of the Navy now. And in retrospect, what's it like now, Admiral, in retrospect?
The capitulation of the Afghan forces obviously is getting great focus right now. In retrospect, it didn't work because they stood down, and I think they actually stood down so that they individually could survive, given the Taliban were coming back in. I thought we could build the army and give them a chance to create structures which would run a country in a much more modern fashion. That just is not the case.
Just not the case. Just not the case. In retrospect. Somebody else used that phrase for the cover of his book, a guy named Robert McNamara, Defense Secretary during Vietnam. And he wrote a book in the mid-1990s called In Retrospect. In retrospect, we got it wrong. And we knew we got it wrong while we were fighting. We knew it all along. And I think these generals knew it all along. Obviously. And how about this? Donald Trump said a 5-year-old would understand that it was a mistake to take the military out before the civilians. And that's true. And I remember in May, this report, look at how cleanly and neatly the military got itself out of Afghanistan.
Where the heavy lift of dismantling 20 years of American military infrastructure is underway. It's now the main hub for shipping out everything from heavy machinery to packing up printer cartridges as America's longest war comes to an end and the remaining 2,500 troops get ready to come home.
Now that's the way you should withdraw once you get everybody else out. Look, it looks like the airport. It looks like Kennedy Airport. It looks like actually Phoenix. But what they were leaving behind at the orders of the general was everything else. Everything. The generals, the president. Listen to this, though. As they're about to turn over, this is back in May, General Miller is in charge of the forces there. Look what he says about Afghan military preparedness.
The Afghan security forces are prepared for it. The Afghan security forces have to hold.
They have to be ready.
That's correct.
Will they be ready?
They have to be ready.
a little bit more straight talk, not total straight talk. They, are they ready? They have to be ready. Are they ready? They have to be ready. Still playing that Washington game, but it's becoming a little bit clearer they're not ready. And if we back out, how could they be ready without us there? That's a big part of this that no one's talking about. If we get out totally, it really leaves them in a lurch. What happens next?
And yet, Afghan troops have had to rely on U.S. military airstrikes to push back Taliban militants that launched a major offensive the moment the U.S. drawdown began. And the suicide car bomb in Kabul that killed dozens of girls on Saturday underscored the extreme violence that still endures here.
The violence perhaps most concerning is when you start seeing violence that affects civilians. Certainly really an egregious attack against school children this past week. That doesn't appear to have any military purpose. That's terror.
General Miller told us the next 2 weeks will be critical, Nora. We're just ahead of a 3-day ceasefire to mark the Muslim period of Eid. He said the last time that happened, the Taliban came out fighting even harder.
And the Afghan military needed us. They needed our air support, and we already knew we were leaving. We knew we were leaving. So that's in May. What was General Mark Milley doing in June? We're freaking out about this stuff, preparing for it, worrying about it, planning? No.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it.
He was playing Washington political games. Well, when you play those games, you can play to win and you can play to lose. And General, you lost. And unfortunately, we all lost. And I knew you were a political animal and a bad one going back to last summer when you took this moment, which was perfectly fine, and made a federal case out of it in some sort of weird audition to the swamp to show how woke you are, to show how anti-Trump you are, whatever. You got political when you said you weren't. When you apologized for being political, you got political. This is all political. Watch.
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there.
Okay. Totally political. Everything about this guy is political. Doesn't seem to care too much about his job. Now, look, when Joe made the decision in April to get out of Afghanistan and not leave any forces, it was an emotional decision. I said last night, I think Beau Biden, his late son, had a lot to do with it. He wouldn't listen to people. He knew he had as much knowledge as anybody else in the room because he's been around forever. And military, you can't tell me anything because my own son was in harm's way. But that doesn't leave the military leaders off the hook. Have you ever heard of a NEO? NEO. NEO stands for Non-Combatant Evacuation Operations.